What's happening with the YouTube? This your boy CJ. Hey man, I'm working on a 2013 Chevy Impala. Okay, so the customer was having an issue, so she was driving and the car just completely shut off on her. Now, it's a few scenarios that it could be if you ever experienced that and I'm talking about just for a Chevy Impala. We ain't gonna try to say it's for a different car or anything like that, which is not. I like to stick to the script on the car that it's on. So when the car shut off and I got to the car, the first thing I did was check the relays and stuff. And the relays and the fuses on a 2013 Chevy Impala LTZ. So the main thing I did, I checked all the main fuses, relays, make sure them was working good, start a relay. On the Impala LTZ is tricky because they don't have a fuel pump fuse. Now, when you go and look in your box, it's not going to say fuel pump relay. But when you look at all the other models, that same location where the other Impalas, the years down from 13, is saying that that's the fuel pump relay, they got it labeled vacuum pump, which is the fuel pump relay. So all that was good. But in her situation, her three things went bad at once. It was the alternator, the fuel pump control module, and the fuel pump actually went bad. But now it's a fuse for that fuel pump. It's a fuse for the fuel pump fuel pump control module, which it'll be labeled fuel on your fuse box. It'll say FSCM, which stands for fuel system control module. Now you want to check that fuse, because that fuse is what sends power to the control module, which then sends voltage to the fuel pump. Now, what I learned was, now this is real critical. So before I took the alternator off, I diagnosed the module. There's videos online that show you how to diagnose just the module itself. You know, I ain't gonna do that. I ain't got time. But I diagnosed that. That was good. I mean, it wasn't good. The fuel pump had went out too, and the person actually was riding on E. So when the car shut off, that's where I was left off at. But I learned that. So when I went and got in the car, I would turn the car. It'd act like it wanted to crank. And then I say, okay, no, it ain't this. It sounds like it ain't getting no fuel. So what I did was I turned the key back and I turned it on. I got one whine from the fuel pump, which was Now I turned the key back, and when I turned it forward, all I got was a Turned it back again to the on position. All I got was a So I said, okay, dang, maybe the fuel pump ain't getting no power from somewhere. Maybe it's a shortage, but this car, only got 130,000 miles on it. So I checked the wiring and stuff, the ground. There's videos on YouTube to show you how to do that. I ain't gonna do that. And all that was good. The wiring was good, but the fuel pump was bad. So I replaced the fuel pump. Still kept getting the same thing. So where I messed up at a little bit was I should have just took the alternator straight off. That should have been the first thing I took off. But I didn't backstep because the module and the fuel pump was bad, so I still won. But I should have did the alternator first. So back to the story, the beginning, straight to the good part was this. Some people say you can start the car even with a bad alternator. That is not always true in every scenario, depending on the model and the make of the car. The 2013s, I learned that once you go and turn that key, this alternator has to be running. The reason why this alternator has to be running is because voltage is being sent from this alternator to the ignition. So if this alternator is completely out, all the car gonna do is crank, because it's not cranking because the alternator is completely bad. So ain't no voltage is getting to the ignition. So the ignition, I would turn the key and wouldn't even have to hold the key, and then the car would just completely still continue to crank by itself. Crank, and then it'll shut off. So long story short, man, if you experiencing that problem, like I said, start with the fuse box. Make sure all your fuses and relays is good. And then you check this alternator. Take this off first before you go diagnosing the fuel pump, the fuel system control module, and the fuel pump. To me, it sounded like it wasn't getting no power. Like, cause I thought in the second click it's supposed to, get the long, but that ain't how it worked. Fuel was already sent up to the fuel injectors, so now the car needs to crank. But everything needs voltage. The fuel pump needs voltage, which the alternator runs on the Impala LTZ. The control module needs voltage, which runs from the alternator, and the ignition needs voltage. So yeah, that was a problem, man, and we out, man.